Alright, well, I didn't expect to be doing this right now, but, you know, it's 1:30 in the morning, and I've got it in my head that I am going to make a follow-up video to a video I made a couple of months ago. It was a wish list for things I wanted for this year, for iPhones and for Windows. So we'll see how they did. I'm gonna play a game that I can play with my eyes closed, so that I can see if I can rapid fire through some of these suggestions. So I'm just gonna make my character here. We're gonna name him Beans, and we're just gonna make a build I'm really comfortable with. Oh no, we gotta make him a thick boy. My bad. There we go. And okay, fine. Master key, of course. Leave all the stock stuff. All right. So, here we go. First up, I was thinking that Apple could maybe be smart about having OLED screens in their iPhones and add an always-on display. No chance. iOS 15 has made no reference to always-on displays, and whether or not we'll see that in upcoming iPhones with different screens, with their variable refresh rate screens, is yet to be seen. But honestly, I wouldn't really care if they did, because, like, come on guys, you can put it on non-variable refresh rate screens. It's not that hard. Android phones have been doing it since, like, I don't know, 2014. So yeah, so that's a big nope. Next up, I think I said high refresh rate, and yeah, that's just about confirmed for the 13 Pro models, which is fine, I guess. I was kind of hoping for high refresh rate on the base model iPhones, but with Apple, when they're sort of working on something for the first time, they usually will divvy it up between SKUs. So not too surprised by that. Okay, next up, I had mentioned Touch ID in the iPhones alongside Face ID, and so far I've also seen nothing on that. Now I think I did see a patent or two come up about Apple potentially working on some Touch ID stuff. It was not in the form of like in the power button like we saw on the iPad. It was more under screen fingerprint sensor stuff, which we have seen before. But if Apple tries to do something like that, they'll do that however they feel like. So that could be good, but it's not happening now for sure. Okay, next up, I had mentioned app library customization, and so far nothing on that. Now iOS 15 and various updates of iOS 14 have resorted the app library, so they're definitely thinking about how the app library is organized. They're just not letting users interact with it, at least yet. It can be sort of weird when they change how something is sorted in the app library, just because you'll get used to how one dumb thing is sorted, and it won't stay that way, and so you'll remember that an app isn't like you'll remember that something is in productivity, and then they'll dump it somewhere else. I never look at it too hard, because most of the time I'll just search or / use the search list in app library, so I'll just flip through the alphabetical list of my apps, and that works too, I guess. It's not very sexy, but whatever. And I had specifically mentioned that the recently used or recently downloaded folder in the app library really annoyed me, and I wanted to get rid of that. And it's still bad. It still really sucks. Now it's even worse, though, at least in my experience with iOS 15's current betas. It no longer does what it used to do, or would show what I was actually recently using. Before I would open an app and it would show up there and it wouldn't go away. Now it doesn't care what apps I open. Now it looks at all the apps I've downloaded. So it's just recently downloaded, and it won't forget. So the last time I downloaded an app was like a month ago, 2 months ago, and the list is still the same. It's still all the same recently downloaded stuff. It's just that it doesn't, there's no time frame for it. So it could be a year and it'll show the same. Oh, here are your last 5 recently downloaded apps. So that's dumb, in my opinion. I think if it's going to be recently downloaded, it should be recent, and at some point that folder in the app library should time out and just not show up anymore. Alright, next up, I had mentioned MagSafe probably becoming more prominent if they wanted it to really take off. Now, we haven't seen the next iPhones, but from all the leaks I've seen, it's going to be just about the same. And in general, MagSafe is not really going anywhere. They've not made too many accessories, and a lot of third-party accessories are half-baked. In general, MagSafe is a weird thing they're doing right now. I don't really see it panning out, but we'll see where MagSafe goes. Okay, I'd mentioned the notch potentially getting smaller, but I had speculated in that video that if the notch is going to go away, it's probably going to go away all at once. Now we have seen some leaks and stuff like that showing that the notch is actually getting slightly smaller this generation. And that's like some pretty reliable sources, but not significantly smaller. And it's in the vertical direction, so it's slightly like less tall, I'm pretty sure. In general, though, it's not a huge deal. And like I said, you know, when Apple gets rid of the notch, they'll probably get rid of it all at once. Whenever they get around to it, you know, whenever under display cameras and stuff like that really get good. Okay, next up, I had mentioned status bar customizations. It was just, you know, it's a dumb gripe I have about them not letting me see my battery percentage in the status notification, or in the status bar on notched iPhones. They just show you like a little battery icon that you know, it changes. You know, it slowly wanes down as your battery gets lower. But I wanted to see a finer percentage, and they're probably never going to do that. They haven't done it yet, and you know, it's such a small change that most people probably don't care about, that it's just probably not happening altogether. So that's whatever. I had mentioned lock screen customization. So that was the next thing I brought up, was for, again, notched iPhones, there's these lock screen like quick actions that show up, which are the flashlight and the camera, which I had mentioned are the camera is redundant because you know, you can just swipe left and the camera will show up, and also, even the, you know, they can both be even more redundant if you have a camera and flashlight shortcut in your control panel, or yeah, and so, you know, if you swipe from the top right, you know, so you can just have those same shortcuts everywhere, I guess, if you want. And so far there's no customization on lock screen still. You know, I don't know if we'll ever see that, or if they'll ever just change what those are. They might, who knows, but not for this year. So another thing that I'm not getting for 2021. And okay, so I had made an ask for widgets to be more interactable, and that was sort of everybody that I was seeing on the internet was thinking like, hey, let me, you know, actually play with widgets. Turns out, I forget where I saw this, but I think even Apple said that widgets aren't really like made like that. So it turns out the actual intended purpose is not for widgets to be interactable like little applets. They're really specifically meant to be shortcuts into other apps. So they're not actually meant to be like messed with on your home screen or in your Today view. And I guess if that's the intention, then they're doing a great job, but I think that's the wrong way to go with it. Yeah, it would take more battery life to have, you know, an active applet on your home screen, but I think it would be cool. Regardless, they're not doing it, and you know, there is a slight adjustment in that, like, I think some, especially like just first party ones, are a little bit more, some first party widgets are a little bit more actively updating. So like I noticed with the music widget, I don't know if it did this in iOS 14, but I noticed it in the iOS 15 beta, that my music widget will update with like a now playing. So that's kind of cool. At least they'll like update to show you more, even if you can't interact with them. So not bad. And I think the last thing I'd mentioned for like practical things I could do on the iPhone side was a hardware ask, and it was for ceramic shield on the back glass of the iPhone. So ceramic shield was the ceramic coating they put on the front display, on the display for the iPhones, the iPhone 12 lineup, and it reduced, or it increased crack and scratch resistance in some ways. And I was just asking for that in the back glass, and we haven't seen that yet because the new iPhones haven't dropped yet for this year, the 13 series. But at this point, one thing I had said was that at the time I was sort of mustering the courage to rock my iPhone caseless, because I was growing more annoyed with my case, and since then I have. So I've been using my iPhone without a case for the last like 6 months. And honestly, I'm not too concerned about it anymore. I haven't dropped my phone once, and having it without the case on makes it easier enough to hold, that I'm not really too worried about it. One thing I do notice is that the back glass does scratch. Not like the easiest, but it scratches, and it's a little annoying, so it would be nice if they added ceramic shield, but I'm no longer like really bent out of shape about it anymore. And I'd also mentioned that the material, this was a little bit later on, but it sort of ties in with this. I'd mentioned that the material of the iPhones is a little bit not confidence inspiring for running it without a case, like specifically on the base models with the aluminum, just because the aluminum can like dent and scuff really easily, in the way that the stainless steel can't. Apparently though, it looks like, at least for the Pro models, I think I saw some links that said they were looking into using titanium, and that could be good because titanium is also just generally more rigid. And in general, Apple, back before all the, like Mac unibody stuff and like the mid 2000s, they made a ton of computers out of titanium, so they've worked with titanium before. So yeah, that could be good as well. But in general, I'm not really too worried about the back glass anymore. I just don't think it's an issue. Now, there's some people that are more careless or just can't hold their phone as well for any reason. That like, yeah, if they drop their phone, they're screwed. But personally, I'm no longer too worried about it. Okay, stuff that I'd asked for that was a little bit more out there. I was asking for system-wide gestures on legacy iPhones, so home button iPhones, and yeah, no shot. I knew that was sort of far-fetched because the whole point is to sell new iPhones. But I thought it just would have been nice as like an accessibility feature or something like that, just so that with, as those phones get older, especially with physical home buttons, as those home buttons fail, because inevitably, it's a physical switch, inevitably it will fail, you could just switch to the on-screen stuff. But in general, it's not that huge of a deal. I think that's a jailbreak tweak somewhere. But aside from that, I just don't think Apple's too worried about it. Weirdly enough, though, I think this might have been the case when I even made that video, but something I'd forgotten about, or just didn't factor in, was the iPad. And the iPad actually does have a weirdo mixture of button controls and gesture controls, because of iPadOS. So, you'll have home button, like iPadOS 14 and 15 capable devices that, you can still do like the control center pull down, and I think even on older versions of iOS, you can still do like the control center pull down, and I think even the swipe up to unlock, even though it has a home button. So there, it does exist in Apple's lineup, just not on the iPhone. But I think for the iPhone it's deliberate, especially with the creation of the SE device. I hadn't really thought about the iPhone SE at the time, but they had a brand new home button iPhone, so yeah, they weren't really gonna accommodate those users like that. Okay, another thing I'd asked for that was more far-fetched was better integration between iPhones and Windows, and on both Apple and Microsoft's part, that has not happened really at all. And that's to be expected, just because they really don't have an obligation to each other, and it's a lot harder to, when Apple's not helping you out, it's a lot harder to go out of your way to accommodate the iPhone from a software perspective. So like having Windows, like just random Windows computers, securely talk to iPhones consistently and without it like being stupid, it would be a huge pain for Windows software developers and stuff like that. So it really is not worth it, and that's fine. And again, I'm not too bent out of shape about it, just because like I don't really like want that anymore. I don't know. I just I think the way I've used my phone and my computer in tandem are a little bit different than they were a couple months ago, and I just kind of have my phone sort of like propped up near me, and I'll just see notifications as they're incoming on the phone, and if anything, that's better because there's no like latency or delay. Yes, if I was on a Mac, I would see it on my Mac too, and that would be cool, but it's no longer like a feature I'm like, oh, this would be cool. Like, it's whatever. Okay. wireless charging stuff. I had mentioned reverse wireless charging maybe for the iPhones, just because it was popping up in a lot of Android phones, and I thought it could be cool. But no longer do I think that's such a great idea, mainly specifically for Apple, from their perspective, because they're trying to do their whole MagSafe thing, where you don't have to align your wireless charging accessories, and everything just sort of works in one go. And that, where reverse wireless charging is not conducive to that, unless they went out of their way to make like weirdo AirPods that like had a big MagSafe ring on them, which wouldn't make any sense at all. So I don't think that's a really good idea anymore. Also, the other thing that sort of showed me that that's a bad idea, is the Apple made battery accessory for MagSafe, because it is also a piece of junk. And it has reverse wireless charging, so it charges your iPhone, or if it's stuck to your iPhone, it can charge from your iPhone charging, and it can charge like your AirPods and stuff. So it reverse wireless charging and Apple no longer go in different sentences, but it's not great. Like, it's not fast, and it's not, I don't know, it just doesn't look good, and I don't really think it's a great idea anymore. Okay, another thing I had mentioned was I really didn't want the Mini to go away, and I wanted them to take it more seriously and give it a Pro model, but that doesn't seem to be the case. It seems like, with more reports I saw since then, that the last mini phone we're getting, last mainline mini phone we're getting is iPhone 13 mini, no Pro model, and it seems like it's completely canned for 14. So, the Mini is dead in the water, not because there's anything really wrong with it. I think it's a great device. I use it every day, and I still love my Mini, but because it didn't sell well enough, for Apple's perspective. Now, the Mini still sold millions and millions of units, but it didn't sell as well as the iPhone 12, or the iPhone 12 Pro, or the 12 Pro Max. And in general, it's weird, but I find myself being the lowest common denominator there when I say I want a smaller phone that fits in my hand easier. A lot of people want a bigger phone for media consumption, and for just general, battery life and stuff like that. And I am not too heavy of a user, so I'm not super concerned about battery life, in the raw capacity sense. Wrong key button. Whoops. But no, I'm not too worried about battery capacity or anything the way that most people are. And in general, to me, when the screen is already that small, I don't really nitpick about people make a big deal about content consumption being so different with a smaller screen, that I've heard that with the smaller screen you can't see as much. And I don't know, I just don't get it. Like I said, when the screen is that small, it's like an inch or two of difference, and I as someone who uses a Mini every day, and I watch YouTube and all that kind of stuff all the time, it's fine. It's just not that small. It's bigger enough over the older iPhones that it really isn't a big deal. And even the older iPhones, I don't know. I've never been annoyed by a small screen. But then again, I'm the kind of guy that thinks the Game Boy Micro has an acceptable screen size. So, I acknowledge that I'm in the minority there. And people want big iPhones, and Apple wants to make big iPhones. So that's sort of it for the Minis. And there's a decent chance I'll stick with my Mini as long as it's viable for me. As long as it's still responsive and still has good battery life and stuff like that. So, I'll probably be on a Mini iPhone that's a couple years old for a couple years. And I'm okay with that, because that's just me. Okay, next thing I had mentioned was iTunes. So it was a little bit of a pivot to Apple software on the Windows side. I hate iTunes on Windows, mainly because it's not Apple's deal anymore. iTunes in general, I always found to be a really unintuitive, really badly built app. But for its time when it was originally built, iTunes was was show-stopping, because you could manage your devices, you could purchase all sorts of music and stuff like that, and it was all in one, and it was great. But iTunes has aged like milk, and it looks bad, and it feels bad to use. It has a weird system for authorizing your computer, because it's trying to securely connect to Apple servers and your iPhone and your Apple ID. So it has a weird authorization system that is weird. It can't interact with a lot of things that you'd think it could interact with, so it can't really talk to your iPhone's like storage that well. It can't manage on Windows. It can't manage your photos at all, and it still sucks. So iTunes on Windows is still just iTunes on Windows. It gets updates, so Apple acknowledges that they have their multitude of Windows customers, Windows using iPhone customers, and so they keep up with it. It's still a program that you can just install on the Microsoft Store. Or you can download from their website, as easily as it's ever been. And it, like I said, it gets updates through the Apple Software Updater tool. But it's not really changed, and I think that's one of Apple's like weirdo selling points. Like it's one of the weird ways they irk consumers over time. You'll have someone who's been an iPhone user for years, and at some point they just get sick of messing with something like iTunes, and they're like, I wonder if it's any different on the Mac, and they look, and it turns out that it is different on the Mac, and the Mac has a better, it has a music app and a photos app and all that kind of stuff that is separate and cleaner, and you interact with your phone through the Finder, and it's generally like a better experience. And so I think that they have a weird idea in their head that it might get like a small amount of users to move to Mac, and cool, I guess. I just wish that as a Windows user I wasn't screwed over. But that's what it is. iTunes is not really changing. One thing I have discovered, it's not new, but it was new to me. A piece of software I'd never dabbled with was 3utools until a couple months ago, and I found that 3utools actually does a lot of things that I wanted iTunes to do, and it's not a piece of malware, which I wasn't. One of the reasons I'd never really messed with 3utools was for some reason I had always just assumed it was malware. For no really good reason. I just sort of thought, this is too good to be true, it's probably malware, and I never tried it, but I gave 3utools a shot, and it's great. It can read the firmware on your iPhone, it can read your local storage, it can update your iPhone, it can restore your iPhone, oftentimes better than the iTunes app can. It can totally import your photos and stuff, which, by the way, importing and exporting photos from or to your iPhone on Windows is a complete dumpster fire without 3utools. Because like I said, iTunes doesn't interact with them, and the Photos app is just broken. Like, it just doesn't talk to it. Not to mention, if you have any sort of HDR stuff on your iPhone, you can't actually open it in Windows unless you buy Microsoft's like $1 extension for that file type. So it's just generally it's just annoying to interface with just Windows stuff alone. But 3utools lets you just sort of like rip all of your photos and very, you can keep them in original Apple compressed stuff, or you can make them general, like, PNGs or JPEGs or whatever. So yeah, really, if it's something iTunes doesn't do well, 3utools picks up the slack for it, and so that has sort of been my own self-fulfillment of that wish list. Is just like, I tried 3utools and it turned out to be really great. So I'm not too worried about iTunes anymore. I'm gonna keep using it for syncing and managing music at a basic level, and that's about it. Okay. Next up, external app stores. I had mentioned the Epic Apple lawsuit at the time. It is still ongoing, of course, like all, litigious anything with big corporations. They are going to take their time and fight it for as long as they possibly can. And they are doing that. So, Alt Store still works well on iOS, like I had mentioned before. And in general, sideloading is still doable for those that seek it out. But we will see about sideloading on iPhones in the future. I really think it's as simple as making it a toggle in the settings, and adding a disclaimer telling, the same way that they, distribute like beta software. All they really have to do is, or make it like profile based or something like that, and make a disclaimer to their users that they're not viable for anything that their users download through that kind of stuff, or they could even go as far as to make it a hardware thing. Apple could go as far as to say, like, we're not viable, like your warranty is void for anything related to external software stuff. And they can totally track it because they have all their internal tools. Like, you bring in your iPhone, they can probably just scan the ROM and see if it's been manipulated in any kind of way that wouldn't happen with Apple verified software. So really they could do it, but they're choosing not to unless they are litigiously told to do so. So that's sort of ongoing. And the last thing I'd asked from Apple was to make repair stuff easier, and obviously they haven't done that. That was sort of a joke when I said it because, well, I know that Apple doesn't care about any kind of repair stuff really at all. But in general, repair legislation has been making some decent headway in the States over the last couple of months. So we'll see. Right to repair legislation might just catch up to Apple, and they might just have to deal with that once it becomes a thing. So, we'll see where right to repair goes, but honestly, it's looking pretty good right now. So I'm not too worried about that. All right, so that was it for the Apple list. Now let me just do the quick run through for the Windows stuff that I had asked for. And actually, there was a lot of disappointment on the Apple front. A lot of what I was asking for Apple was, normal stuff that Apple would never do. For Windows stuff, I got a couple things that I wanted. So first thing that I had mentioned, something I didn't get, funnily enough, I'd asked for more temperatures in Task Manager. So, Task Manager as of, I think, 20H1, or sometime after 1909, when Windows 10 1909, it started showing you GPU temps in Task Manager. And it wasn't very complicated. It's just like one GPU core temp. But it was cool to pop up in Task Manager and have it tell you something more than just utilization. And so it asked for temperatures for memory, processor, all that kind of stuff. And so far that's not there, but honestly it's an easy enough thing that they could do it anytime. So not too worried about it. And other software for temperature sensing is like really easy to download. So yeah, just a small convenience that they haven't added yet that I think they really probably will. Something they did do was I'd asked for them to make HDR better. Now, HDR in its base form is still just about at the same place it was at when a couple months ago. The only difference now is Windows 11 exists, and Windows 11 makes the HDR toggle like a little bit more out there, like it looks a little bit less stupid, but it's still just a toggle. The big thing they changed since I made this list was auto HDR. So the big announcement they made in regards to HDR with Windows 11 was they're adding auto HDR to Windows, which was a feature originally announced for the Xbox, the new generation of Xbox consoles. Auto HDR is basically meant to go and retroactively add some HDR-ness to your content when it comes to games. So, I think they showed off some Xbox, original Xbox and Xbox 360 games that they had, like, sort of added some highlights and stuff, too, that just made the colors pop a little bit better, that made the game look a little bit better just from a post-processing standpoint that was separate from messing with the game code at all. And they've added that to Windows 11. I still believe you need an HDR capable display, and I'm not sure, because I don't have an HDR display, I'm not sure if it's in the current Insider builds, but it has been promised for Windows 11 in general. So that I think that's a big deal. I think auto HDR is actually a really nice feature to have, because there's a ton of older content that could totally use with some HDR spice. So yeah, I think that's a big one. Okay, let's see. Next thing I'd mentioned was control panel. So at the time, I was vying for control panel to go away. For the longest time, I was saying, hey, if you want the settings app to have all of your old control panel settings, just go nuts, go all the way, and remove control panel, and put everything in settings, and just have no control panel. And I had mentioned, like macOS has just system preferences. There's no like system preferences and old system preferences. Like it's just one menu, and they have sort of improved it. So especially with Windows 11, Windows 11 is really the big deal here, because a lot of the things that we were seeing for 21H1 and 21H2 were not changing much. Windows 11 was what kind of came in and added a lot of these features that I asked for. So in regards to the control panel, the new settings menu in Windows 11 is drastically improved from the Windows 10 settings menu. It's much cleaner looking, it's much easier to find stuff, and generally stuff just looks cleaner and is sorted better. It has added slightly more control panel only functionality. So very seldom do you get actually linked to a control panel page unless you are like really messing with something. like, you know, if you're in the settings app and you're going like into like submenu, side link, that's when it might open the control panel for you. But for the most part, it tries to keep you in the settings app and give you the setting that you want there. In Windows 11 or Windows 10, even though Windows 10 was slowly moving towards that, it was still willing to just throw you into control panel for something that like it would do better there. Like for the longest time, it would just send you to the power management settings and control panel instead of in the settings, and it still kind of does that, but it's not front and center anymore. It's not just a button that you click, it's like a button behind a button. And that sounds like it's more complicated, but it's more intuitive. It's hard to explain. But yeah, Windows 11's settings menu being overhauled really like helped that. And the control panel is still here, and it still has all of its functionality. And I think that's I think it's honestly a good thing. Because if they're not willing to commit, it's because control panel, like really, if you think about it, control panel has a lot of stuff in it, and more often than not, nowadays control panel will link back to the settings, and that's just because they've been taking so long to like painstakingly move everything to the settings. So control panel, they sort of coexist, but now settings has taken a much more front and center like place. And I think if they are going to keep control panel like throughout Windows 11's lifetime, they're probably going to continue to trim the fat until they probably inevitably remove it. But for now, it's still here for the like couple of settings that are hard to just get rid of, or relocate into the settings, and that's fine. Okay, another thing that I mentioned that actually got really good in Windows 11 was driver updates. So at the time, 20H2 was the newest version of Windows 10, and something that was interesting with 20H2 and even 20H1 or 2004 was that driver updates were slowly being moved away from the device manager and towards the settings app into Windows Update. So what you used to have to do in Windows 10, in like 1709, 1803, 1809, was you'd go when you did a new installation of Windows, more often than not it wouldn't find drivers like really like super quickly, and so you could beat Windows to the punch, like Windows trying to find drivers in the background. You could beat to the punch by going to Device Manager, going to the device you want to update, and saying check for updates, and it would find it like 9 times out of 10. So it was great, and half the time it was already looking for it in the background, so you just hit the button and it would find it. And then after around 2004, 20H2, they made the change to where that button sort of stopped working. So it was still in the same place. You could still go to Device Manager, right click on your missing driver and say update, but it would stop working because now what it would do is it would get it through Windows Update. So before, Windows Update wouldn't even show drivers in the list of things it was downloading. And it would do it on the background. And then around that time it started showing drivers in the list. Since then, when Windows 21 H1, they had like a little submenu that said driver updates, or really it said optional updates, and then it would sort them between optional feature and driver updates. And so they actually had the word driver update in the settings, so that was a big deal. And then in Windows 11 they made it even better. So in Windows 11 now it's an entire like context menu that you click into. In the updates menu, there's just like the check for updates, and then there's an advanced options, and under advanced options there's optional drivers or optional updates, and it'll show you the driver updates there. And it's a lot cleaner than it was in Windows 10. In Windows 10 it was like a menu inside of a menu, and it looked like a little hyperlink. In Windows 11 it's like an actual like here's the menu for downloading optional updates, including driver updates. So they did make it better, and I'm pretty glad about that. The other thing that Windows like had sort of half-baked in Windows 10 that I wanted them to fix was Bluetooth settings, and I'm glad to say that in Windows 11 they have like totally fixed my gripes with Bluetooth settings. So for the first and foremost, Bluetooth settings for or just toggling Bluetooth on and off used to happen in the little like sidebar that you the little like notification sidebar that you'd pull up in Windows 10, and it was like a really like sort of buggy toggle because it would like really not show you if Bluetooth is on for like a couple seconds. Like it would kind of lag, and then it was a weird little button. You could like disable it from there, so it wasn't even like consistent in that menu. I don't know, it just didn't look good or like feel intuitive. And then in the settings app, it was absolutely abysmal to mess with your Bluetooth devices. Like they were all just sorted really strangely, and pairing was stupid. It opened up this dumb little sub menu that had a little loading bar that didn't look like it was doing anything. It just didn't look good, and it didn't feel good to use. Windows 11 has totally fixed this. So Windows 11 has like its little control center menu that it pops up now, and the Bluetooth button is front and center there. It's much easier to read, and it works more consistently than the sidebar button used to work. And in the overhauled settings app, there is an entire new, it's like the second category in the list, but it's an entire menu just for Bluetooth. And it looks a lot better, and it works better in my experience. And yeah, so it's sexier and it's better. It's exactly what I wanted them to do. So yeah, totally fixed with Windows 11. And then I had mentioned that the start menu in Windows 10 is inconsistent. Sometimes it just doesn't work. I had mentioned at the time, like, sometimes, you're doing updates, the system's a little bit busy, and you hit the Windows key and it just doesn't pull up the start menu. And sometimes it fully like fails out. Like sometimes, I've seen the start menu like fully become unresponsive to the point where like you click the start menu and it'll say the start menu isn't working. Windows will sign you out now. And it'll just sign you out because the start menu's broken. And so obviously I wanted the big thing that I was thinking of with the start menu that like makes it seem inconsistent, or made it seem inconsistent to me in Windows 10, was its weird integration with search. So it like kind of was the search bar and the start menu at the same time, and then also its weird tiles thing that it had sort of adopted from Windows 8. So I had mentioned that the start menu was using telemetry, and I wasn't super clear about it in that video, but basically what I sort of meant was live tiles, basically. There's some native live tiles, and there's not too many live tiles, period, but there's enough that like I feel like even just having the like plugin or whatever for running tiles and live tiles in Windows 10 made the start menu unstable. And in Windows 11, that's just about been fixed. Windows 11 is much more focused on like the offline experience. So now it's much more about just like, oh, here's your most recently opened files. Here's your like recommended apps. It has a cleaner app list, and most importantly, it doesn't have tiles. So it's an entirely redesigned start menu that doesn't have the one thing that I thought made it really unstable. And lately, because I've been using the Windows 11 Insider preview build for a little while, at least for me, the start menu has been very consistent. So new start menu just about fixed my gripes. We'll see how it pans out over many user systems and over Windows 11's actual release, but it's looking like the start menu might be fixed now, which is great. And it's still integrated with search, so that like search still phones home. But in general, I think I've also seen that search in Windows 11 start menu is better. Like it looks better. And it still pings the web, but it doesn't just like throw a bunch of random junk at you. It like is kind of clean about it, and will only do like one or two like recommended searches and stuff like that. Like it just doesn't need the internet as much, and it looks better and it runs better. So start menu just about fixed. And the last sort of side note I mentioned was the Xbox services. So I had mentioned that the Xbox app in Windows was like sort of in beta at the time. It was sort of half-baked, and it wasn't really good for like actually downloading and managing your Xbox games or Game Pass or anything like that. And I just wanted that to be a little bit better. And again, Windows 11 comes to save the day. Windows 11 entirely redesigned both the Xbox app for that very purpose, and it redesigned the Windows Store. So the Windows Store is also now more inclusive to your Xbox stuff. So in general, Windows 11, like totally, like by way of redesigning the settings app, the start menu, and the Windows Store, it really fixed most of my gripes with Windows 10. And in general, I find that Windows 11 just looks and feels better to use. The animations are more fluid. I like the rounded edge design. I'd mentioned HDR, like auto HDR and stuff like that. And in general, the operating system looks better for HDR. Like you can, you can use it on an HDR display, and the operating system itself does not look like dumb, because in general Windows, like when it's in HDR mode, destroys SDR content, including the operating system's like just general look, and Windows 11's like Aero Glass design just pops a little bit better. its inbuilt backgrounds, which is a dumb thing to talk about, the just the background images, your wallpapers. But the included wallpapers in Windows 11 are better for HDR. They pop better. Like they don't look so like muted and crappy in HDR, which is like the bare minimum, but it's nice. So yeah, that's about it. I somehow managed to keep this video a little bit shorter than the last one. But yeah, that's just about it. On the whole, I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm too surprised. Apple in general is not very good at listening to customer feedback in the way that customers think is intuitive. Often, if Apple does something that is pro-consumer, they will do it through their own lens or on their own time. So I imagine any number of the things that I've asked for from Apple will either not happen at all, or will happen when Apple feels like it, how Apple feels like it, and that's fine. Like I mentioned with like the mini phones, they're just gonna stop making mini phones because they didn't sell as well. And at the end of the day, it's Apple. Like you can't really like, as much as you can like predict or think like, oh, this isn't that hard. At the end of the day, they just do what they feel like doing, and you just sort of have to roll with the punches from them. And then with Windows, yeah, it turns out all we needed was not Windows 10. So, the constant iterative nature of Windows 10 sort of, I think overall, it was good for Windows 10 in terms of its like feature set, because Windows 10 turned out to be, like, when Windows 10 first launched, with, what was it, 1507, it was basically just Windows 8 but not stupid, and then by the end of Windows 10's lifespan, 21H1, even with Sun Valley in the fall of 21H2, Windows 10 has really come into its own, and it's actually a pretty good operating system. But it turns out all the like core gripes I had with it needed redesigns, and Windows 11 came in and saved the day. And in general, Windows 11 strives to be a little bit it strives to be Windows 10 with the fat trimmed, with just more features, them being better laid out in like the settings and stuff like that. The whole operating system looking a lot more modern, and it requiring more of your hardware. Asking you to have a DirectX 12 capable graphics card, and to have a more modern processor. And for a lot of people, that kind of sucks, because it means your computer can't get Windows 11. What it does mean, though, is that in the future, as Windows 11 continues to be Microsoft's flagship operating system, it will mean that Windows 11 will be stable and modern throughout its lifespan. Windows 10, for example, like when it launched, had pretty loose requirements of users' PCs. For the most part, if your computer could run Windows 8 or even Windows 7, it could run Windows 10. And that was good for compatibility and getting people back into Microsoft's main operating system experience, but it turned out to mean that a lot of computers could continue to just age poorly on Windows 10. So without using UEFI boot mode, without using secure boot, without using any form of modern graphics, allowing you to use like these really just old junky drivers, and there is a point where hardware is classic and like needs to be just like maintained, because like sure, it's old but it's good, but there's certain hardware that needs to just be like, okay, like it might be cool and like maybe it needs to be preserved for a certain amount of time, like manufacturers need to keep up with their drivers and stuff like that, but at a certain point there has to be a cutoff, and I think Microsoft sort of acknowledged this, and it's really not that scary, because Windows 10 will continue to be supported until the end of 2025, and at the end of the day, if your computer can't run Windows 11, it can still run Windows 10, and Windows 10 is still great. Windows 10 is still going to be getting updates. It still gets Sun Valley in the fall. But yeah, in general, I'm pretty pleased with Windows 11. I'm also just not one to be affected by Windows 11's like required modernness, because I have a modern PC, because I'm an enthusiast that keeps up with modern hardware launches, and I might be in the minority in that, but I also am very like well familiar with exactly what Windows 11 requires, and so I can also see that there's a lot of people that think they can't run Windows 11 that actually can, that all they really need to do is go ahead and enable secure boot and TPM, and that's it. And so I'm aware that a lot of people are upset, or like they'll have to make big changes to even be able to run Windows 11 or stuff like that. But I think at the end of the day, it's a good requirement to ask your users to be safe about stuff, especially for new manufacturers. Really, that's the biggest thing I think Windows 11 does, aside from fixing all of my software gripes with it, is just making new computers guaranteed as good as they can be for the consumer. So I think Windows 11 turns out to be anti-consumer for people with old PCs, but pro-consumer for people looking to buy new PCs. So it's a little bit weird, but in general, I'm pretty pleased with Windows 11 and what Microsoft's doing with that. So yeah, that's just about it. I can't really, I haven't really thought on future wish list stuff. In general, if it's something that hasn't happened yet that I asked for in the last wish list, I'm continuing to, at least in some form, ask for it or want Apple or Microsoft to continue to think on it. And yeah, so that's about it. Yeah, you have a good rest of your day.